Story of the South Australian Miller family's ties to Scotland. The story begins in Edinburgh, Scotland, when in the late 1840s a young George Miller moved from the nearby rural Pentland Hills. On the 7th of June 1850, George, at 22 years old, marries a local lass, Agnes Ferguson, in the parish of St Cuthbert, situated under the shadows of Edinburgh Castle. Several churches have stood on this ground. Local tradition holds that a chapel was founded on the site beneath Edinburgh Castle Rock by St Cuthbert himself, around 670 AD. The steeple of the present church dates from 1789. They must have crossed paths in the Royal Mile, as George lived at 21 Pleasance and Agnes lived with her parents at 15 High Street, a part of the Royal Mile, 7 minutes walking distance and around the corner from one another. After marrying in 1850, George and Agnes lived at 22 St Mary Street, just around the corner from the World's End pub, noting that the World's End exterior walls form part of the historical Flodden Wall, a 16th century stone fortification that protected Edinburgh's historic Old Town following the Battle of Flodden in 1513. Then in 1859, George and Agnes, with 4 children aged under 7, decided to leave Scotland and sail for 4 months to Port Adelaide, South Australia.
In 1859, the Lady Anne departs. A long journey across the equator. They brave the roaring 40s. Arriving at Port Adelaide,
Parts of the Flodden Wall still exist in the foundations of the World's End pub at the bottom of St Mary Street. The gates of the city were located outside the pub, and as far as the people of Edinburgh were concerned, outside these gates was no longer their world. It is quite possible George enjoyed a pint or two here. George, before he was married, when residing in 21 Pleasance, would have walked past the remaining part of Flodden Wall many times. Agnes's parents, James Ferguson and Helen Brown, married at the Canongate Kirk, Edinburgh in 1825. George's parents, David Miller and Janet White, were married in 1818 at the parish of Newlands Church, situated 8 miles southwest of their hometown, Pennacook. Janet, the daughter of Pennacook locals, James White and Agnes Hogg. George was born a twin with Mary in Pennacook on 7th of August 1826. The family, David and Janet, with 7 children, lived in Kirkhill, Pennacook up until 1839. Kirkhill being situated adjacent to the Pennacook Trinity Community Church and Old St Mungo's Church. Janet died in 1853, aged 53, and is buried at Pennacook Old St Mungo's Churchyard. In 1832, a notable local, John Miller, no known family connection, was murdered near the Old Crown Inn, as he had disturbed grave robbers fleeing the nearby Pennycook churchyard. The old crown was believed to have been frequented by Edinburgh's notorious body snatchers, Burke and Hare. In 1839, David and Janet and family moved to Roman Road, 9 Mile Burn, a small rural hamlet at the foot of the Pentland Hills, just 3 miles southwest of Pennycook. The 1841 census has David, Janet and 6 of the children living there, including George being 14 at the time. The 1851 census has David, Janet and 2 of the family members, John and Peter, living there. The family is known to have lived at 9 Mile Burn for at least 15 years. George Miller died in 1890, aged 64, in Port Pirie, South Australia, and Agnes died in 1913, aged 83, in Adelaide. From what we know, that the South Australian Miller connection in Scotland had a long history with the Pennycook, Dunsery and Westlington, Pentland Hills region. The origins of the name Miller primarily derives from occupation or someone who operated or owned a mill, or from the Latin word molendorus or Molendina Burn, that is a stream in Glasgow. Although there are no direct specific Miller clan, there are noted strong ties with the MacFarlane clan. This particular crest relates with various Scottish branches of Miller, originating from Dumfries and Midlothian region. I like to think that our Miller name is derived from the Latin version Molendina Burn, and linked to beer brewing, as the monks of St Mungo in Glasgow used the local Molendina well spring at the cathedral to make their beer. And also from the same burn in 1556, the Tennant family began beer brewing. This has been narrated by George and Agnes's great-great-grandson, Nigel Miller of Kimber, South Australia.